Well, we're looking this week, friends, and today is Tuesday, August 24th. We're looking at ways to substantiate the amazing claim that Jesus made that his words were a necessary and sufficient condition to have a solid foundation in human life. That uniquely, among all the voices in the history of the world, his voice is the one that we need to listen to as we think about what we're going to base our lives on and our identities. And so I want to read to you a passage again from Matthew 7. This is verses 15 through 20. Jesus says, "Beware of false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing." In other words, they look, sheep are an animal that is not aggressive. They look innocent. They look harmless. But inwardly, they are not sheep. They're ravenous wolves. You'll know them by their fruits. And here we switch metaphors. Are grapes gathered from thorns, figs from thistles? In the same way, every good tree bears good fruit, but the bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, nor can a bad tree good. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown away. You'll know people by their fruits. This is the word of the Lord. It's interesting. There's a part of this passage I didn't know until recently. I taught this course in medical ethics for Fuller Seminary, and I discovered that during the genetics movement at the beginning of the 20th century, we're talking 1900s, early 1900s, the field of biology had become a field that was developing very rapidly, and the belief spread that in among many intelligent people in Western society that genetic modification was the key to the human future. And it's interesting, this view has reemerged recently, but it got a very bad reputation as the century went on because it was one of the primary views that was used by the Nazis. They did human experimentation. They believed the justification for the whole Nazi military program was that they were a superior race, that within the whole story of the human family, theirs was the most important segment, and that they were genetically superior to other parts of the human family, and therefore they could exterminate people that they felt were inferior. And this way they would be like a geneticist or a husbandsman who is trying to perfect a herd of cattle, right? Getting rid of the weak ones and keeping the strong ones is a way to make the genetic pool stronger. In the same way, this is one of the excuses for the whole Nazi phenomenon. Now, lest we just blame everything on the Nazis, this view was very influential under a woman called Margaret Singer and many intellectuals, including many pastors, Protestant pastors in particular, mainline pastors, beginning of the 19th century, who supported this same set of ideas and preached about it. How it's the opposite of Jesus' preaching. We talked about yesterday that the poor and the marginalized, the suffering and the broken were to be embraced and helped. They set aside the view that you had to get rid of these elements in the human gene pool. They replaced this. It was called the eugenics movement. Good genetics. Eu is Greek for good. Eugenics movement, and this was the kind of thing. 60,000 Americans were sterilized during this movement. There were famous experiments done on African Americans, the Tuskegee experiments, and eventually we had laws that prevented this. But these ideas were very influential, and this verse was sometimes used, grapes gathered from thorns or figs from thistles, to imply that, if you had the wrong genetics, you were going to produce the wrong kind of person. This was a mistake in how genetics works anyway. There are many more mutations, many more possibilities to come out of a single joining of two genetic pools than could ever be known in advance. You can't manipulate the gene pool in that way to create superior human beings. You couldn't at that time. And so it's a misreading of this verse. And this verse is actually a verse in which Jesus is teaching something entirely different. He's not teaching about genetics. He's teaching about results in our lives. He's teaching about the consequences of our attitudes and our behavior and our orientations in the world. And I included these verses today because we have looked at ways in which we could demonstrate the truth that Jesus' words are a true foundation for life, the only true foundation. One way is the gift and influence of his life and the lives of his followers. Another is the substance of his teaching, that it was unique, countercultural and counterfactual, and yet turned out to be true. And a fourth way to justify Jesus' claim is to look at other attempts to provide a foundation. Are you following me? So we need some way to get going in life, right? We don't want our beliefs to be random. If we want to be rational creatures using our reason, we want to start with things we can trust, beliefs we can trust, and build our life from there. And that would be our life's foundation. So how do we know that the things that we're trusting are really true? How can we discover that the things that we're assuming about life are actually the case? Well, that simple question, apart from scripture and tradition, became very important in the 1700s in the great universities all over the West. It was the quest for it was called the quest for foundations, or foundationalism. And many figures are associated with this. Often the first great figure is René Descartes. Descartes realized that if you were going to get people to accept foundations for things, and people had different religious perspectives, he thought, I will set aside the religious traditions of life, the Christianity that was predominant in the West, because that depends on trusting a particular personal figure, Jesus, and the scriptures, and that's not a universal basis for reason to proceed. It can't be a universal foundation for human reason, because it's too particular, it's too historical, and so he wanted to find a place that human reason could get a grip, that everyone could agree to, that couldn't be doubted, and he tried to find that in human consciousness. I think, therefore I am, and there were a whole lot of variations on the same theme, but Western philosophy went on a quest for certain foundations that couldn't be doubted, and that quest went on from the mid 1700s right up through the middle of the 20th century, and it began to fall apart because every proposal for foundations was found was not truly foundational. Not that it might not have an element of truth, but it couldn't be presented as an argument that you could demonstrate through reason alone. You couldn't kind of get away from other kinds of background beliefs about life that you couldn't justify or prove to all reasonable people without any sort of religious convictions being involved. And so this long quest for certitude has fallen apart. And we live in an era that's called the postmodern era, because that modern search for foundations didn't yield any fruit. And people have moved on in our culture and assumed that you can't have any foundations. It's fascinating. So what are the results when you don't have foundations? Well, in this course in medical ethics that I taught this summer, I presented some of the work of a figure called Peter Singer, Dr. Peter Singer. He runs a famous institute of ethics at Princeton University. He's an Australian, and he's not a believer, he's an atheist. And he is what's called in ethics a utilitarian. So he believes that the one goal of ethics, whether it's social ethics or personal ethics, is to create the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Right? That sounds like a reasonable principle. Except that without any background beliefs about the sanctity of life, the importance of every human person, the idea that we're made in the image of God, the sense of God being someone who directs us toward the care of the weak and the marginalized, Peter Singer has gone back to that viewpoint that was common in the mid-20th century. And his view is, why should we allow people that are not rational beings, because for him rationality is the key thing, and he thinks that the utilitarian principle is a thing we can discover through our reason. And if you can't plan your life, if you can't control your life, if you have mental diseases, if you lose your mental capacity to be independent, if you're an infant, you're not a real person. And so he recommends infanticide and euthanasia for people that he doesn't view any longer as morally rational agents. This is a return to the mid-century view that the Germans had, that you should cull the herd, you should purify things genetically, you should be able, from a godlike position of intervention, to decide whenever you think there's someone who doesn't quite qualify as a person, you should be able to eliminate them. It's a shocking view. but it illustrates the failure to find foundations apart from religious beliefs and a larger worldview that can really give a valid ethical system and a pathway through life. Let's take a moment and pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you that we have a thicker worldview and we're not dependent on human reason alone, let alone a viewpoint of human reason that is largely shaped by Western individualism and by a market economy that views us as rational agents, maximizing pleasure and minimizing pain. And Lord, we look to define ourselves differently as people who are defined by relationships with one another and with you, who are of inestimable value both to one another and also to you. And we ask you to help us keep this in mind in all we do and say. Amen.